Hello, I'm Charlie Wells and welcome to Self Matters, the podcast where we interview the people shaping the future of mental health. This week, I am delighted to have Martin Yelling. Martin is a famous runner, ambassador and advocate for running and movement. He's been a coach to some of the best runners in the world, including his wife, which I'm sure he'll tell us. He's a podcast founder and more recently the founder, CEO of Stormbreak, a charity that's helping children discover movement in order to improve their mental health. I'm a bit of a fanboy of Martin's. I've read his books. I've been following him for a number of years. I'm a very keen runner. One day he's going to persuade me to go running with him, but I'm so thrilled to have you on the podcast today, Martin. I'm excited to hear your story. Welcome to Self Matters.
Thanks, Charlie. I'm really glad to be here. I'm not sure I've ever been called a movement advocate, but that seems like a nice title. I like it, so thanks.
You're always been an advocate for movement in everything you've done. It's a thread through your career. And it's something I'm passionate about too. I think we undervalue how we use our bodies to make ourselves feel great. You have a fantastic story. So let's start right at the beginning. Who is Martin? How did Martin become Martin? How did you go from a young boy interested in running all the way up to becoming a mental health advocate?
I think that's part of the journey, is understanding how my experiences of movement and being a mover have shaped me as a child, as a young adult, as an older adult, and hopefully will still continue to shape my life experiences and the way I am in the world as I continue to grow, learn, develop as a human. So I'd say I chose my parents carefully. What I mean by that is that I could run. So actually, because I could run, it offered me, as a young child, a sense of many things, and framed my lens of the world as a mover. I grew up in a single parent home with just my mum in quite a disadvantaged upbringing. We were pretty poor, we didn't have much money. My mum worked multiple jobs. It was an emotional and a financial kind of stressful time as a young person. That's hard sometimes. And we didn't have all the things that other children and families had. I guess I didn't understand just how uncomfortable some of those things were until I was a bit older, because that's just how I lived. That was just my experience of living. But I soon discovered that moving, and happened to be for me running, was one of those things where I could escape from some of that. I could learn, I could teach myself coping strategies and skills. I didn't know what they were at the time. I just do it. I basically felt better, right? As a young person, when I ran, running gave me a sense of achievement, a sense of mastery. It motivated me. It gave me social connections, helped me find a place in the world, right? And these are things that we'll come on to, I'm sure, but for lots of adults and lots of children and young people, they really struggle to do that now. They really struggle to feel a sense of purpose, to feel a sense of value, to feel a sense of belonging, to know how to develop their own well-being. And so for me, I was lucky that I muddled my way through as a young person through using sport, physical activity, running to help me. And when I was very angry, I could go for a run rather than hit something or steal something. That was realities. So, I managed to somehow blag a place at a 4th tier university and get out of that environment, which I really enjoyed. Moving away, but running still formed a part of my life. Really important part of a central thread to my own physical well-being and my own emotional well-being. And then I started to compete reasonably high level, both internationally running and internationally at triathlon, and duathlon. What seems like a lifetime ago now, Charlie, but national champion a couple of times and did some amazing events, had some amazing experiences. And I was also lucky that I met my wife, Liz, when we were both at college, an amazing runner. She won medals at Commonwealth Games and went to 2 Olympic Games. And I think through that set of experiences that we were privileged enough to have, we earned them. Right? We earned those experiences by putting in effort and application and dedication and commitment. They weren't served up to us. Particularly for Liz, I spent a bit of my time carrying her bags and trying to support her to be a better runner, whilst I was trying to be as good a runner or duathlete as I could. And then at the same time, doing a PhD and then a postdoc at Loughborough, which was all around behaviour change, using physical activity to support children and the adults that work with them. In that case, at that time, it was teachers. So I've had quite a big chunk of my life where I've used my own experiences and learning, but also I think I've been able to have a capacity for learning from other people. So taking those experiences, some of which I was really privileged to have, Olympic coaches, particularly people that worked with Liz for a long time, and take their knowledge and mould it and for my own experiences. But then when I started moving more into coaching, also be able to share those a little bit with other people. So in summary, I think, who am I? I'm sort of a combination of a lot of complex, some positive, some less so experiences of where I am now as a still learning and growing human being.
It's a fantastic story, and there's so many bits I want to delve into. One thing I've always found really interesting is you've obviously always had an interest in how running affects the way you feel, right? And lots of professional athletes that we've spoken to, they basically say, I loved my sport so much and I dedicated so much to it, and it almost breaks you, right? And then you have to build up your psychological strength in order to be the best athlete you can be. But you have got this kind of full circle thing. You almost started running and realized that it helped you feel great and it helped you psychologically. And then you became a professional runner. And that must be a highly intense environment, right? That's a high performance, high focus environment. That's psychologically unusual. But you got into psychology and you studied psychology, and then you started working out how could that help children. So how does the balance between your interest in your mind and your sport work?
I think I've got quite a complicated mind. Often it's firing quite a lot. And so one of the things I learned pretty quickly was that going for a run helped me regulate a lot of those thoughts and feelings, and also helped me learn to direct them in a positive way. Now, if we stick with the athletic sense, that could be performance at a reasonably high level. And you're exactly right. Performing at an elite level is not normal behaviour. It's neither normal nor healthy, particularly, right? You're bordering on obsessive, got a lot of unhealthy character traits. You've got a lot of things about your own personality that you really need to seek to understand at depth in order to be able to apply them in a challenging environment in a really effective way. For me, that was about also understanding the real benefits of why I participate that sit beyond a performance-orientated lens or framework. And I recognised very early that it's actually the emotional stability that being a participant in moving brings. So my take was, if I can do something with the emotional side of why everyone moves, or has the potential to if they don't, then can they lead richer, healthier lives? And if that's the case, what can we do? For me, that would be coaching around behaviour change or well-being, particularly in adults, but also in adults that work with young people. What can we do to help people and still see that movement and physical activity as something which is attainable, that's something that reinforces the kind of person that they would like to be, where they're not exhibiting unhealthy behaviours. Unfortunately, lots of elite athletes, in hindsight, when we look back, do have sets of quite unhealthy behaviours. How can you then put those in your lifestyle to bring about healthy habitual change? I think that was how it started for me. It was taking that set of lived experiences, being able to apply them at grassroots, for want of a better term, the inactive population. Park runs was a great example of that I've learned a great deal from. And then actually live it out in your life so it benefits adults and children. So that's kind of what I do now.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And having just been an athlete yourself and interested in the psychological side, you then ended up being an author and a podcast and a coach, right? You've coached at the elite level. You're being very modest saying you bag carried for your wife, right? Your wife is an extremely impressive runner, but you were effectively mentor, coach, psychological support.
I think I've had a privileged experience of getting to work with lots of people. So my belief is that being active and moving at whatever level has so many potential benefits for people, whether they are a completely inactive person who has zero exposure, or whether they're trying to apply themselves at the highest level. So if we're thinking about the highest level, I've been lucky to work with some talented people, and that's fun. I like that. But I also like the bit where people say that they've changed their lives through embedding movement, being active, has supported and shaped their life in such a meaningful way. So it's more important for me that people can see that they can do this activity, they can utilise moving in their life to achieve something personal for them, than win an Olympic medal. Significantly more people are going to benefit from moving in a healthy way than people are going to win Olympic medals. That's where my whole behaviour change shift in thinking worked. And so, I wrote a book about running and did a podcast with a friend of mine, Tom. He was the COO of Parkrun, but he's got a new title now. I can't quite remember what it is. He does something globally with Parkrun, bringing Parkrun to new locations in Europe and Asia and the Middle East. A fantastic role.
You decided to actually found your own organisation. I think it was in 2018, if I remember correctly, when you started working with Stormbreak, which is obviously about movement, but it's also about mental health and school systems and how do we do behaviour change across large systems. Was it Parkrun that inspired you to try and start something that was sort of systems-wide? What was the seed of Stormbreak?
The actual seed of Stormbreak was, why do we wait as adults to mistakenly learn skills that help us recognise our emotions, that help us respond to them, that help us regulate them? And that was what my experiences were. We see lots of adults in our day-to-day, and in fact, people that might be listening may be working directly with people who have a set of experiences that they're trying to overcome, they're trying to work through, they're trying to find ways to support themselves or others. For me, it was a cause driven by prevention rather than a classic medicalised model of reaction. Prevention, for me, begins young. So why wait until you're an adult to suddenly discover powers of moving or physical activity or whatever it might be, dancing, creative art? There are so many ways in which you can help your emotional well-being. Why wait? We need to act early. It harked back to my PhD and my postdoc that I'd sort of left while I was training and coaching and competing. And so I said, well, let's start helping coach and work with young children so that they can develop preventative strategies. And let's do that at scale. So rather than do that locally, let's try and do that at scale. And if so, how do we do that in education? How do we do that in healthcare? How do we do that in social care? Where do we begin? So I founded an organisation called Stormbreak. We do prevention and early intervention support services for younger children aged 4 to 11 to support their mental health, emotional well-being.
What is a Stormbreak and how does it help someone?
So back when I was doing my own piece of research around regulation in movement, I wrote something called a pictorial child effort rating table, and it was a bit more academic back then. But one of the things I learned is how children regulate their physical activity levels is important, but not as important as how they can understand their emotional regulation through engagement in that. What Stormbreak is the name of the organisation, but it is also the mechanism by which we deliver a therapeutic approach to teaching children these coping skills. So it's a short 5 to probably 15-minute period of movement for mental health. So we coined the phrase mentally healthy movement back in about 2017 when we were developing this. And a period of mentally healthy movement is an activity which is done with an explicit focus. So it's very intentional and it's very purposeful on utilising conversation, guided conversation, a little bit like health coaching in adults, that's appropriate for the age of the children you're working with, to help them work through particular issues. So, for example, when we structured a Stormbreak, in order to deliver a short period of mentally healthy movement, there are fundamental components that slot in: use of language, framing your own body as a trusted adult, the type of activity that you might do. So it all looks really simple and accessible and inclusive. It's actually quite complex what goes into the coaching element of a Stormbreak. And then founded also on the importance of the relational connection between a trusted adult that surrounds the young child and the children themselves. So we're also boosting the connection between children and the adult that's working with them. And then we're also working not only with a child on their own, but we hope as well that they sometimes do Stormbreak in groups. So we're making connections between children in groups. So Stormbreak's a period of movement for mental health. You have to do some moving, but it doesn't mean you simply go for a run. What we've done is we've categorized those moves, as we call them, according to lots of different fundamental ways of moving. So it's quite unstructured, actually. Rather than being a typical, here's a coached thing, we have a set of expectations around what it should look like, a part of the process is that it doesn't look like that. And that's really important, particularly for an anxious young child or a young child who is learning ways to control emotions. And we want to give them a sense of freedom. So we have breath moves, little movement, much more focused on how to control breathing. We have play moves, much more focused on social connectivity and imagination and being creative. We have musical moves, lots of dancing. We have creative moves. We have free moves, which was actually done with a parkour coach. All of these movement activities are threaded together in a program of support that a child can do with a trusted adult who may be in a school. That could be their class teacher, maybe at home, so they could be their parent, their carer, their guardian, could be a social worker, could be a social prescriber, could be a mental health practitioner. That's the concept.
I love this concept. It doesn't only feel true, but it's clinically validated. There are two elements that I think are interesting to Stormbreak. First of all, you've got to be able to recognize that you need to take one, right? This is self-reflection, recognition, like, okay, I'm feeling this, I recognize this, oh, I'm going to do something. I've now got the tools to do it. And just allowing people to observe that moment has a positive effect. So I think training that into children is really important.
It's complex, actually, that, Charlie. That's really difficult for children to do, but it's really important outcome when they do it. So, of course, what we see, particularly with a lot of younger children and people listening who work with younger children, may know that I was one of these young children. You struggle to articulate your emotion. You struggle to find the words to explain how you're feeling. And then you worry about what might happen when you do give those words or you say them out loud. Some adults still do this, right? They're fearful about something, they're anxious about something, they may feel shame or judgment or comparison. So they don't describe their thoughts and feelings and emotions very well in words. And so teaching children to do that and teaching the adults that surround the children to accept and validate those words is really important. And then to understand how to enact something suitable. And we see children like this all the time, unable to really articulate their emotions, so might resort in withdrawal or anger or physical response. How do you then take that young child from a position where they feel in a secure and a safe enough environment to articulate those emotions, and then they feel enabled and empowered enough, and they have the skills and knowledge to be able to do something to shift that particular pattern of thought? And that is an incredibly challenging skill set for an adult, right? So how do we expect young children to do it? It's really difficult. They're flooded with emotions and change and challenges. And for some of them, they live in complex, traumatic, chaotic environments. Most adults I know don't manage their relationships particularly well. How do we expect 9-year-olds to do it? If we genuinely want a future society, a future planet of human beings that can live together in healthy, happy ways, we have to do something about it with the children that we work with now.
Even if you take something down to basic psychology, so the CBT structures, it's really complicated for an adult to understand that. And once you get to the labels and the models, what I love about what Stormbreak does is it helps you recognize it, but then just gives you this kind of tool set of movement structures, right? Which anyone can understand quite quickly. Anyone can adapt. I collapsed and had my brain hemorrhage while running. And then I used movement and running to manage pain for a number of years. Now I use movement all the time in everything. I use breathing movement. Everyone thinks I'm a fidget in a meeting because I'll quite happily stand up and do certain movements. But that's not even just anti-downside things. I use storm breaks, as you would call them, to get my focus back in the room because I can feel my focus disappearing in a meeting. You can't force yourself to focus more, but you can move your way to focus more. It's a fantastic tool set to know how you can use your body to control your mind. We must talk about the scale of your impact. I believe you've recently done your millionth Stormbreak. How do you deliver a million Stormbreaks?
Carefully, I think. Initially, we said, where are children? Where are the adults that surround young children? Where can we get the most scale at prevention? This was pre-pandemic. So we started off with a programme in education in primary schools. 25th of April, a school in Suffolk completed the millionth Stormbreak. And the reason we know that is because at the same time as building the approach, building the model, developing the therapeutic intervention for prevention, but also early intervention, we also built a digital platform. In the construction of that digital platform, we're able to track the data. We're able to see the insight from engagement because it's included within the platform. So we're quite different from a classic charity in that, yes, we do go out and we deliver programs and services, but also we then enable the organisation or the individuals that are doing those services, take a system change look, to do that themselves, to monitor it, to see, and that enables us also to track. So I know exactly when the first Stormbreak was delivered, and I know exactly when the millionth, and I can tell you every other one in between. So gaining scale was something we were conscious about early, but it wasn't the driving force behind what we do. The driving force behind what we do was, for me, if I can positively impact one child's life, great. So yeah, we've delivered the millionth Stormbreak, and also now, as a part of a response to COVID, we got some support from BBC Children in Need. And we were able to do a little bit more work. We wrote a programme for BBC Education called Mood Boosters. We helped script an episode of Hey Dougie, which is something I thought I would never do.
One of my favourite programmes. Fantastic.
and so, we've started to find new ways to build our work into systems to enable scale and change. And that's been quite difficult. It's not an easy process to do, as people working at the front line of this will realise. A part of achieving that scale was in schools, but a part of the response to COVID was realising the issues are far greater than the ones we can support through our sort of universal approach, which is into schools. So we really wanted to get more into early intervention and more specific due to the needs that we'd seen emerging in COVID, so more specific with our approach. We now have scalable digital programs that will help practitioners and professionals who work with children across all sectors tackle things like early emerging anxiety, because our work with ICB partners has shown that that's a really significant emerging issue for children and young people. 1 million children being referred to a CAMS service in 22 to 23, 28% of those still waiting some kind of support. 32% did receive support. And last year alone, over 40,000 children still waiting for that support. Our role is to say, how can we help stem that tide, that rising tide? What can we do? Who do we need to work with? And how do we do it?
It's fantastic. It's so inspiring. We actually have a number of listeners who work in senior psychology roles in the NHS. So if they want to find out more about Stormbreak in your organisation, where do they find you?
You can come direct to me, martin@stormbreak.org.uk. Have a peep around the website, which is stormbreak.org.uk. If they don't want to come to me direct, just go via hello@Stormbreak.
So yes, I highly recommend you that amazing organisation. How do you cope with this? You're now the CEO of a large and growing charity that's affecting the lives of tens of thousands of kids with millions of Stormbreak. You have a media profile. You're the coach, the official coach for the London Marathon, I believe at the moment. All sorts of exciting things. You're a busy person that is now taking responsibility for other people's mental health as well as your own. What does Martin do to look after Martin? Do you Stormbreak yourself?
I guess I do, a grown-up version. Yeah, I think the ways in which we can support our own emotional well-being is really important. I can remember years ago banging on about the importance of a more holistic approach to well-being, of which movement was one of those things, being active was one of those things. So for me, I'm still active. I still feel the stresses. I think what I've become better at is acknowledging those stresses, so seeing that they're there and allowing them to be present without feeling this urgent need to try and fix them. It's almost like founders syndrome, where you think, I've got to try and do something about this, particularly around some of our work in systems that are transforming and very challenging to work in a changing system. I can sometimes take that too personally. And it's not me, it's just the environment that we might be struggling with or facing. I have to learn to let that emotion arrive, sit with it. It's kind of the same as we would teach our children, sit with that emotion. And sometimes it is uncomfortable. So one of the things I think I'm reasonable at now is sitting with an uncomfortable emotion, riding discomfort for a bit. And being active happens to help me do that. So in a particularly stressful day, when something's not going particularly well, I might go for a swim or ride my bike, and the intensity with which I ride it usually reflects how well the day's gone. And then I come back, and I've also got 3 young children, twin boys who are 10 and a daughter who's 15, and they're all involved in their own busy lives. I think the fundamental things for me are staying close to a small group of friends, being able to talk about those things, being active myself without trying to be too isolating. My friends joke at me that I really don't like other people, but actually I do. I generally am, but I also know when I need to step out of that environment. It's highly stimulating, can be highly stressful, and I know that I need calm from that environment, and I know how to put those things in place. And for me, that is moving.
Great advice. We always end with the big, difficult question. Imagine if for a day you had a magic wand, or you were the prime minister for the day of the world, president of the world, and you could change one thing that you think would have a massive positive effect on the mental health of everyone. What would be your one wish for the world of mental health?
I have this real tension in my work where we use digital, right? As you do at Hello Self, you can harness the power of digital intervention for scale and for impact. But I also, particularly with children and young people, want to get kids away from digital. So I've got this tension around digital and the impact that it has on everyone, not just children and young people. Constant distraction, constant social pressures, increasing in all sorts of anxiety in adults and young people. And I believe now it's generational. So the generation of being connected to your device and all the benefits, but also all the harm that it brings to you, is unparalleled. We're 3rd generation in. So grandparents now would have had portable computers, then their children, right? So, and the children now that we're working with are so dependent on devices, and so are the adults. We go out for dinner and we'll often see a family just looking at their screens. So I think one of the things I would do would be to seek to re-understand how you use digital, and perhaps do less with digital and tech innovation to enable humans to be healthier and happier. So I've got a little fear at the moment of the direction of tech and innovation, and I wonder how we can stay on top of that to remain human. And I think one of the ways of doing that is to really tap into what it means to be a human being. So if I could wave that magic wand, it would be to take more care around the scale and type of digital innovation that we've seen, and really carefully think through the potential impact. There's some amazing work out there with people instrumental in developing things like the infinite scroll or the like button. And the thing that they all say is, I wish I could take that back. I wish I'd seen the future a little bit around the impact that it would have. I thought it was a great idea at the time because I was driven by XYZ. My magic wand would enable us to take a step back and think carefully about how we build innovation into our lives.
What a great use of a swish of a magic wand. I love the idea of less addictive technology and more addictive movement and humanity. That would be a pretty interesting world. And interestingly, technology might enable that, but it will just be a very different relationship with technology, right? Martin, it's been absolutely fascinating. As always, it's a great chat. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Self Matters. We've got new episodes out every 2 weeks, so make sure you hit follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and of course watch us on YouTube. As always, head over to our social media channels to find out who'll be joining us in the next episode. That's all for today, though. See you next time.